Oh, hi. I fancy meeting you here. It's cheap laughs. Cheap laughs. Cheap. Made me laugh.
This is not what I was expecting.
No, that's nor me. Because all my teaching now is on Zoom, and this is like our auxiliary bedroom, which is unused. So I teach from in here, and I have in front of I have a keyboard here, and I have the guitar here, and every now and then I just feel like, oh, Major 7, just be like that would spice up. Wouldn't it though, when someone's like, did Freud really think that we, wanted to possess our fathers actually? Yes, he did. Yes, he had an overly systematized, rigid operational of the tripartite self, but a lot of it still makes sense.
We should give our followers a little bit of a peel back of the curtain into our relationship. Do you remember when I was a freshman in college, how most of our time was spent on a couch with guitars, literally watching MTV2?
Yes.
Playing like white guy jazz chords. Like we're watching Coldplay while playing Moondance on our guitars.
I don't think it was quite Moondance. It was one step up.
Yeah.
I do remember there being a lot of discussion about how at the end of Yellow, he goes to a minor 5. And then we thought that, was just the most amazing thing ever. I remember that being the topic of conversation. The minor 5 chord. He did it. He broke the mold walking on that beach in that video.
I still don't know how they did that video, because I think he's walking in slow-mo, but singing the song on a regular pace, it's quite a feat. But
God, we're old.
Yeah.
I even that will be, those days will be difficult to explain, because the MTV2, and this is some deep knowledge, for the followers of the show. I mean, it wasn't even a paid channel. It was just randomly coming in for some frequency.
It was weird, yeah.
That's how tragic it was, and just sort of sitting there waiting for the Queens of the Stone Age to come on.
Such a topic of our conversations is this global tragedy. Sorry, we were living together on 9/11.
We were.
Speaking of you and I talking about global tragedies and national tragedies, I was in college and I was in class, and I was next to our friend Ben Dockery, world-renowned pianist, and he leans over to me and he says, "Did you see something about a plane flying into a building?" Because it was early. We grew up in the same time zone as the World Trade Center. Anyway, I remember driving home. I went to my bass teacher, who is a whole other story, right? And he said, "We're under attack. Go home. What are you doing here?"
That's exactly what he'd say. The University of Tennessee Jazz Department, this could be the next. You've got to get out of here, man. You're Jack Ryan, or like it's an episode of a crap episode of 24.
Yeah.
You've got to leave. This place isn't safe. Get to the UT Jazz bunker. There, we will find security.
Yeah. And in my memory, he had a cigar. I don't think he had a cigar. It was like 8:30 a.m. But I remember coming home and you were out in the driveway, I think in your underwear, on the phone with your sister in New York. Yeah, we lived in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
anyway.
I remember that day very, very clearly. There's a lot of the intervening years that are fuzzy, not for ha-ha reasons, but just because that's the way time blurs. But that, yeah, I remember how gorgeous that day was. And, you know, and I remember it being like a picture perfect day, not a cloud in the sky. And, you know, I can remember in the intervening years when, bless them, when you two really took the baton and was like, we are going to milk all the sentimentality out of this. And like, they would play Beautiful Day if you opened up a car wash. Like, they would come and they would, you know, which is a great song. But, you know, I can remember a distinct interview where Bono, shortly thereafter, he was like, you know, to think about, you know, about 9/11 is it really was. It was such a beautiful day. It was so beautiful that day. And I was like, you know what? It was. It was
Like
a
when
lovely
they
day.
say the
How did
name
you
of the
know?
movie.
Hey, he's Bono and you're not. You know, he can do
That's
that.
true.
He can pull that off. You know,
Yeah.
he
He's
can
wearing leather
his
pants at
discourse
6
is
feet.
mainly.
And I'm just wearing jeans. I'm just wearing normal jeans.
Yeah, yeah. So think about that. Maybe think of yourself in the trouser pecking order where you are at your advanced age. Oh God, national tragedies. I've had guts full. I can't take many more national tragedies in
Yeah.
general. Maybe it's because we're on our first floor, which in American terms, second floor, everyone, little inside knowledge. Overlooking terrace homes, and for once it's not raining. You can actually see the sky. It's such a beautiful day today. See, then it cues. Cut that in right there. Beautiful. Not a dry eye. Amazing. But no, it's you know, it's just sort of these series of rolling catastrophes, and it's almost nostalgic to think of 9/11 because it was so contained. It had boundaries. It had borders. You
Well, in
know,
this
it
country,
lasted what if
in this country right now,
you
we're
know, like,
having a 9/11 every day.
which is utterly lost on humanity.
Yeah.
You know, could you imagine? But that's the amazing thing. 9/11 lasted how long? From the time they boarded the plane to the time those towers fell, like a couple of hours. You know, we're on to, you know, we're experiencing a real test of endurance of how long can the human experience endure suffering every day, the same suffering in the same way, before they just go. Because you know, it would be very easy for me, you know, it's a big discourse over here of people being like, oh, did you hear about, you know, America? And you know, lest we forget, Canada celebrates Thanksgiving as well, and they did the same thing that a lot of Americans did. They went and, you know, had turkey and, you know,
Yeah.
did whatever and infected a bunch of people with this god awful respiratory virus. But people are doing the same thing here for Christmas. People have just, I think it's very easy to cast some absurd shadow about Americanness, or in this case, Canadianness, whatever the hell that is. I wouldn't know. But I do think that people have just hit a point where it's like, I have to hold the world together in some way. I have to engage in some sort of habitual action which makes this tolerable. And this time of the year, like, let's not forget, is it any wonder why every major religion, every pagan religion, has a winter festival? Because I'm sure 2,000 years ago, this was just as fucking terrible. You know, I'm speaking for myself when the sun goes down at 3:30 of an afternoon. And it, you know, you can understand why people are just like, no, I have to get the stuffing right because that's what I do in December. December is stuffing month. But it is remarkable, to your point, that, you know, a 9/11 every day, and in the same way over here, you know, it doesn't sound like much, but, you know, between 20, 30, 40, 50 people every day in Wales die. Wales is only a country of 3 million people.
Yeah, no, I
It's the
think
size of, I mean,
per capita, that's so many.
that is through the roof. I mean, how many is Washington State? 5 million, if that?
Yes, I don't remember, something like that. But in
Yeah.
in North Dakota, South Dakota, which are our worst states, there's very few people, and it's something like 1 in 85 citizens or something like that.
Jesus. But it's, yeah, it's a test of how much can we endure and still maintain some sort of clarity about or perspective on. And we could say that, oh, Americans are selfish, or oh, British people are obsessed with Christmas, and perhaps both those two things are true. But I do think people have a limit at which they can hold this in their head.
Well,
at which
I thought
they can
about
sort of tolerate it.
I thought about a comparison. I was reading this article in the LA Times this week about how medical experts are now pleading for some kind of harm reduction, because they're saying that abstinence just doesn't work. And that's a word that I hadn't put towards it, but it makes a lot of sense. And from the liberal progressive side of our political spectrum, this is something that I've yelled at people about before. When you're talking about sex education and 20 somethings, like, it's ridiculous to pretend like you can tell them that they should be abstinent. And I think it's true when it comes to social interactions and social distancing and everything. I feel like we have to use the mask as much as people have to use condoms, and I think we have to reduce our harm as best as possible. But it's unrealistic to expect people not to see their family on the holidays. As much as that's the choice that I've made, I have very little judgment for people who have decided against it.
No, I think maybe, I suppose it's something I have to keep challenging myself, because it's very easy, and I'm sure there are discourses which permeate every culture, particularly in the West. It's easy to look out and go, oh, it's poor people. That's a very British thing. Oh, it's the scallies. It's the sort of rednecks that don't care. Or, oh, it's young people who just want to go get drunk in the city center. Or, oh, it's, middle class people who want to drink wine with their friends. It's very easy to gaze out and go, oh, it's someone else who's doing something. But lest we forget, we are people who trade in a work which calls into question and seeks to explore people's relational patterns. We can't, you think about phenomenology or existentialism. We are relational creatures. We are in context. We cannot separate ourselves from that. And this thing demands that we do. So, it's a good exercise to remember, like, how can we can't stop people from doing that.
Yeah.
It's I don't know how this situation resolves. I don't know, as a practitioner, because I don't know if this is even a debate in the States anymore, but over here there are a number of people who are like, no, I'm going to see people face to face, and if I take that risk, I take that risk.
Yeah.
Which, over the summer, when cases, like in Britain, cases just went away. This wasn't, it literally was not an issue. And for 3-4 months, I saw clients in person. Now I could not, I couldn't dream of doing that. And I don't know, just the endurance of this, the management of this situation as it continues to carry on, as one assumes will continue to sort of billow out of control over the next 6 weeks, 8 weeks. God help us. It's it is a test of perseverance, for sure. I don't know.
And what I'm experiencing with my clients is that they are growing fatigued again. It's come and gone waves in terms of, oh, this is okay, I can make this work, to like, I'm miserable, please end this. And we are in a wave of the virus right now, and we're also in a wave of declining mental health, and that people are feeling really isolated, really anxious, and desperate. Anyway, all that to say, there's a lot of uncertainty, and I'm seeing in people back to this place of, I'm not okay with this. I'm not, like, this kind of desperation.
Yeah, and to sit with that, because I've found it in myself, and I'm comfortable talking about this because I've talked about it with clients. I'm having check-in sessions next week, but I took 6 weeks off in part because I wasn't beginning to manage this very terribly well. Not within sessions. Sessions were the most sort of orderly, comfortable space of my week. But it was in the bits in between, the bits after, in which this was starting to wear on me in a place where I wasn't enduring it terribly well. And it's to meet that fatigue, I don't know. I'm not sure what one does except acknowledge that. I don't know. I think part of the fatigue is the constant engagement with this, and I have to challenge myself. And this is as not being a behavioralist and someone who rejects so much of behavioral thought. I think part of the fatigue in this is not only that there is a threat, but and I can say this with some certainty because my wife, being a medical doctor, has related to me. I don't understand anything about COVID-19. I wouldn't pretend to. But I know for a fact, given our age and our demographic information, the threat to us and the threat to our families is, well, minimal. It is, and based on the knowledge that they have about this thing. It's not to other people. It's a very real problem for other people. But I think the fact that we have to stare this thing in the face over and over and over and over again through the news, through podcasts, through the we've replaced all of these habits and all the things that we used to do with sort of staring at this thing that we have no control over at all. And we just have to keep looking at it, going like, I think it's different over there. My sister in New York is always talking about case positivity rate. I don't know what the metric is. Like, if you have a metric you check every day, do you have one?
We do have one in Washington State. I haven't checked it in a while, but it usually hovers around 5%.
But is that normally what you would look to?
It's one of them. I know I'm mainly thinking about new cases per day. That's what I look at.
Okay. So, like, for example, I am conscious of cases per 100,000 people. That's the number that I have sort of latched onto because I'm an idiot and I could have picked lots of numbers, but I chose that one. And I think I think part of this fatigue is, we have grown up in a world which has promised us your choices will not be constrained. I mean, not to go full champagne Marxist here, but we have grown up in a world that said there is going to be nothing but choice for you. Now, granted, there's different nations put different spins on that. The American slant is, if you work hard enough, if you achieve merit, your choices will be yours. You have some autonomy over them. In a British sense, it's if you went to Eton, if you went to the right public school, or the right private school rather, and were born in the right family, to the Marquis of, the Duke of Earl. And for the first time, those things are constrained. And I think so. In one sense, there's sort of this ambient choices are gone. In the other sense, there are very specific, quantifiable things we can stare at over and over and over and over again. And we can check it. We can chart it. We can chart our fucking despair. That's not normal.
No.
That is in no way a recipe for a meaningful life. I don't know. What do you do?
Hunker down. Well, the other side of this, Mason, is that we also are people who, you and I specifically, not everyone who may be watching this, but we're people of great privilege and comforts. And we're able to surround ourselves, for people like us, it involves hunkering down, pulling up a good show on Netflix, putting a blanket on, eating comfort foods and hunkering down for the winter. There's a lot of people, who don't have that ability, and
of course,
and who are far more, I think, in far more dire straits. But
no, and lest we forget, I mean, it's the economic precarity that will come out of this which is
Massive.
just piled onto the general economic precarity, which is already there.
Right.
Yeah, and you know, what can you do apart from select the charities you give to, and you know,
And vote.
make the donations, and you know, and vote, and yeah, I suppose again, it's this, all of the basics apply. Like, you don't have to be Viktor Frankl to sort of, or Kierkegaard, to understand that yes, there is meaning in this, and yes, may we have a new understanding of what we were thankful for. May we be imbued with an aliveness, because there is death out there. Maybe it's not directly coming for us based on scientific data. Yes, there is poverty. Yes, there is suffering out there, and may we, you know, acknowledge our position in life. May we also acknowledge, you know, our own suffering in this. And I think that doesn't have to be capital S suffering or capital T trauma. This is awful for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is, but I think it's, all of those things still apply, but the endurance aspect of it. How do you continue to do this over and over again when those, and I think this is such a unique position to find ourselves in within world traumatic events. You know, especially in the same way that, you know, in terms of the mythos, the iconography of American life, there are certain set pieces, whether that's Flag at Iwo Jima or Breadline or 9/11. You know, the great set piece of the British psyche in a lot of ways is the Blitz, and that is the place in which when Britain retains a great sense of purpose, which, well, is incredibly destructive because it fuels Brexit, but that's another conversation. But in that moment of peril, and this is, research has shown that what Brits associate with the Blitz isn't common at all to other people. It's, you know, this idea of community and commonality and altruism. That's true of most, you know, you look at Stalingrad, or you know, you look at great catastrophes all over the world, and people tend to be pretty kind to one another when things are terrible. I think where we find ourselves in such a unique position is during the Blitz, when the V2 rockets were screaming over Hyde Park. You could go to a pub and you could embrace and you could sing a song and you could hug. And I think what's amazing about the time we find ourselves in, like, the guidance now is people are like, well, if you're going to meet with your family over the holidays, open a window every hour and don't sing. Don't do any carols. That's literally where the guidance is. Like, if you're talking, just maybe wear a mask at the table, or just try not to talk too much. You know, and I think I'm not sure as a species if we can abide in that.
Well, I want to tell you a story before we end.
Go
on. I have a patient who is quite anxious, and this is a metaphor that comes up a lot for us. The other shoe is going to drop, but when? And on Tuesday, we were talking, and they were saying, well, he was saying that he's feeling pretty good. He's having a good week, and that makes him think about the other shoe going to drop. This is a very complex.
When is it coming? It's coming from somewhere.
Yeah. I forgot to tell you, this is another part of my story. This is part of my counter-transferential information that I bring to it. But my father had a mini stroke a few weekends ago.
You didn't tell me that.
Well, you know, it was only scary for about 24 hours. He went into the hospital with a droopy face and slurred speech, and they did a bunch of tests. Wow. They did a bunch of tests on him, and it was essentially, you know, it's called a transient. All the medical people watching know the name. It's a TIA. It's a mini stroke. And they did a bunch of tests to see that there wasn't any deeper damage, and they released him from the hospital the next day. It was all very lucky, but it was a little bit of a warning shot to him about his lifestyle. My dad is a 68-year-old Southern man, still smokes and drinks, eats whatever he wants. You know, it was a little bit of a wake-up call, which may have been a blessing, you know, so we're counting our blessings. But sure. This is what I was bringing into this session. My client talking about when is this other shoe going to drop? And I don't think it was very therapeutic. I don't think it was pertinent. But I said, you know, he and I do talk a lot about our aging parents, his aging parents, and particularly the fact that his father is unhealthy, doesn't have very healthy habits. And I said, eventually the other shoe that it will drop is that we're seeing this generation age, and some of them aren't aging gracefully. And we see it with the coronavirus in terms of the refusal to take it serious, and sociologists have been saying for a long time we're going to have a medical crisis on our hands one day, and I think we're there. But I said, we don't have to think about that right now, but it is on the horizon, and I want us to be aware of it. I don't know if I said it exactly that way, but we talked a little bit about that. And then the next morning, I went into my new office where I'm 1 week into my new office, and suddenly there's a construction project going on right underneath me. And I am like complaining every morning, can you please stop the noise? Because they're supposed to stop at 8 a.m. Anyway, I'm in a session at 8 a.m. I'm incredibly distracted. I'm sweating because the drilling and sawing is happening. And thankfully my client, who I'm on the Zoom call with, says it's okay, like I understand. And I'm like, I know it's okay, but it's not okay with me. And this would only happen in the pandemic, right? Because I have my phone on my desk. I get a transcript pop up from a voicemail from the client the day before saying, John, please call me. My mother passed away in her sleep last night. And so I'm just flooded. I'm discombobulated. It was thankfully like 2 or 3 minutes before the session ended. So we were able to actually have a productive session, despite the construction noise and everything like that. And actually it led us into a conversation about therapy and about the relationship and about the illusion of containment. It was actually rich. But I was flooded. I called the client from the day before, and he's a mess, understandably. And we talked about this yesterday, and how bizarre that was and how serendipitous it was. And I don't know where this part comes connected, but it feels connected. We hang up after about 30 minutes with this uncertainty in his life. Am I going to go to the funeral? It's on the other side of the country. Like, what am I going to do? All the questions that people are facing in 2020, even people who are losing people to non-COVID reasons, is, am I able to grieve? And I go out into the hallway, and one of the construction workers is there, and he stops me and he says, John, like the way you would say it if you knew me. And we all have masks on, so I'm like, do I know this person? And I say, yeah. And he says, I'm like on my way to use the bathroom, so I'm like, I don't know, like, if I have time for this, but like, he says, I'm so sorry about the noise. The building manager told us you could hear us. I didn't realize that. I'm really sorry. It won't happen again. And I say, well, thanks a lot. If I was doing graphic design or some other form of work, it would be fine, but I'm doing mental health sessions.
No problem.
And he says, I totally understand. I have a lot of respect for what you do. I'm even geeking out on it a little bit lately, and I've been listening to a lot of podcasts. And I was so still flooded from the events of the last hour, the construction noise, the session, the news about my other client's mom, and I was having to use the bathroom, that I think I was just like, oh, cool. All right, bye. I walked off.
Big fan.
I don't know. I kind of feel like it was his way of telling me he listens to the show, but it was, what is the connection?
I think if the lesson here is we are, and you don't have to be Sartre to make this point. We are enslaved to one another. We cannot live without other people. We can't do this. We can't make sense of reality. We can't make sense of ourselves. We can't make sense of time. We can't make sense of the present, or the future, or the past. Yeah. We are social, relational organisms, and we have been since we crawled out of the sun. And I think that, it's something that I have to remind myself, for someone who as I get older, certainly much less so than I used to. I can still flirt with cynicism. We can still flirt with misanthropy. But we're drawn to one another. May we be kind above all. You know, what I just taught a week on, you know, psychoanalytic concepts, and at the end of it, I just tried to summarize, going, look, all of these are tools. All of these are ways to look at a therapeutic encounter. These are things that might be useful. They might be not. Remember, none of this is more important than being kind and being curious to one another. And that's ultimately, if anything's going to come, by and large, it's going to come from that. You say something profound, no one gives a shit. You know, but if you can be stable and curious and kind and present and empathic and work to get it and to hold it and to contain it, hey, might be onto something.